Mark, what it means to play around with it when you've done it. Now, I'm sure that that accident haunted you, for sure. Yeah.
After killing his wife, William Burroughs moved to Tangier, Morocco, where he struggled with his heroin addiction. There, in the form of notes, journal entries, and letters to Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, he excavated the literature that would become the novel Naked Lunch.
You know, Burroughs is a fairly foreboding character in his novels. It's like, I mean, I find Burroughs to be hilariously funny. You know, like, some people are like, oh God, Naked Lunch, it's obscene. You know, all these guys getting hung, all this jism, you know, all this disgusting, you know. What's missing from that reading of Burroughs is it's totally funny. It's like this burlesque, but the material he's using is the raw images of the unconscious.
William Burroughs was alien to many people, and definitely to mainstream Western culture he was alien. And it's only an alien that would have the circumspection to write about Western culture like he did in Naked Lunch.
Naked Lunch stood out because it was so different. It was a novel that knocked people out or repulsed them. It also inaugurated the whole era of hip because it was so subversive that it had its own cachet.
In 1962, the novel was tried in Boston, Massachusetts for obscenity. The courts charged that it contained child murder and pedophilia. Burroughs' supporting witnesses included Allen Ginsberg and Norman Mailer. It would be the last major literary censorship hearing in the United States. Eventually, in 1966, the Massachusetts Supreme Court overturned the ban, ruling that the book had indeed redeeming social value, and it was henceforth widely published in the United States.
It won a lot of censorship stuff because there were no laws against any of it. They didn't know gay people that did heroin and bragged about it and talked about it and made it seem appealing. That was not on the law book. It was thinking up something that wasn't even illegal yet. And that book was so passionate. And in the beginning, you can't have a better press agent than a censor, especially in the 50s and 60s.
This is William speaking under attack for Naked Lunch being pornographic. So he says, certain passages in the book that have been called pornographic were written as a tract against capital punishment in the manner of Jonathan Swift's modest proposal. These sections are intended to reveal capital punishment as the obscene, barbaric, and disgusting anachronism that it is. As always, the lunch is naked. If civilized societies want to return to the Druid hanging rites in the sacred grove, or to drink blood with the Aztecs, or feed the gods with blood of human sacrifice, let them see what they actually eat and drink. Let them see what is on the end of that long newspaper spoon.
Man is carried in naked by two Negro bearers who dropped him on the platform with bestial, sneering brutality. The man wriggles. His flesh turns to viscid, transparent jelly that drips away in green mist.
I think Burroughs' writings, particularly Naked Lunch, were quite revolutionary. I mean, they talked about things that nobody talked about, especially in America, which was very, I'd say, rather more sexually repressed than, because of the Puritan traditions of America and so on. And he really, it wasn't just homosexuality, I mean, it was just his alien sexuality.
In the 60s, it became quite political with the hippies. Arguments that they had a very definite program, and most of those objectives were realized. The end of the Vietnam War, legalization of pot, end of censorship, recognition of minority rights. Most of those objectives have been at least to some extent.
When Bill witnessed an event such as that, he wrote about it, and what you get in the writing is what he saw. Yeah, I mean, he said all the obvious things, it was a fascist state. was frightening. Like in Grant Park, when the police were approaching, he wondered if he'd be able to withstand it, or if he would break and run. He was worried about that, and also he was worried about his ability to move fast enough to get away, because after all, most people were kids, and he was like in his late 50s at that point.
Getting a book out. I'm going to go be with them on Saturday night. A family party on Sunday. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Allen Ginsberg was more of a hippie. Hippies always got on my nerves. I mean, we were punks without knowing we were punks. We looked like hippies, but we had punk values. No, William was much more up our alley, my friends, because he was angry and caused trouble and was not politically correct, where Allen in a way was politically correct within the hippie movement. Burroughs was not even politically correct in the hippie movement.
There's a real connection between the beats and the punks. The punks really are neo-beats. Much of the punk philosophy or lifestyle or attitude, you know, punk was a very good word to use.
Right in that period of time that I met him in '75, his works were influencing punk rock. And I guess early queer culture was kind of born in punk rock, I always thought.
Don't forget he had that column, Time of the Assassins, in Crawdaddy magazine back in those days. Crawdaddy was a fairly widely read rock magazine, and so putting himself into that context, he was opening up the door to these sort of younger kids who probably only read one of his books, like probably Junkie, if anything, but really kind of adored him as the godfather of punk, which is what he became, you know. And also you have to remember that Bill lived on the Bowery 5 blocks down from CBGB's, in an area where many of the punk rock stars lived. So he really was kind of in that world. I remember Patti Smith at St. Mark's Poetry Project in '74, after a reading, ended it by telling everyone that William Burroughs was back in town. And isn't that great? Welcome to New York, William Burroughs, you know?
William, I was just in Amsterdam, and I haven't been in Amsterdam since we were there.
He would read in Max's, and Patti Smith would read or else sing. And it was like the early it was the early punk movement, and he was connected to that.
He came to CBGB's all the time when we were developing our work, and through the 70s, he could be seen sitting there like the royalty that he was.
There are many passages in William's books, particularly in Naked Lunch and the Wild Boys, in which he prophesies punk rock.
William had a vision of the future that was parallel to punk rock. This idea of a pack of boys or a pack of androgynous souls scooting into the future, you know, with sores and, scarlet fever visions, and just the whole movement of Johnny, you know, in the Wild Boys. And my first album, Horses, is littered with Burroughs-type references.
Punk rock was influenced by Burroughs because I looked upon punk rock as this huge international anti-authoritarian cultural rediscovery and recreation revolution. I mean, you were trying to upend all the categories and hierarchies. You were totally anti-authoritarian, and you were after these voices that had been neglected because they weren't giving you the values of the middle-class bourgeois society. In the sense that punk was all about trying to tell the truth and be anti-authoritarian and be black humor, I think Burroughs is totally punk rock and a role model.
It's funny because the punk rock thing I think was really exciting for him, more so than say like counterculture 60s kind of music. I remember in '77 seeing Burroughs. He read that piece Bugger the Queen. It was so hip that he did that. You know, the audience was just like completely amazed that he did that. He said, English rock group the Sex Pistols wrote a song called God Save the Queen. I think he commended it, and he says, like, I'd like to sort of further the sentiment with a piece I wrote called Bugger the Queen. And he would read these verses, and then he would, like, exclaim each one with like "Bugger the Queen," and the whole audience was starting to join in every time he said it. They were "Bugger the Queen."